Hey everybody, Phil here for Phil vs. Solver. We are going to look through a hand sent in by one of our viewers. I'm going to talk about what I would have done. We're going to look at what a solver would have done, and we are going to find out who is right. In this one in particular, we get into a really interesting spot on the turn and another really interesting spot on the river. And specifically on the turn, I want to point out a thought process issue that I think a lot of people suffer from. Without further ado, let's get into it. In this hand, our hero is in middle position with Queen Jack of Spades and opens to 2.5 big blinds. Our hero is called by the button and the blinds fold. We had to do a flop of 8-7-4 2 spades, so we flop the flush draw 2 overs. Our hero decides to check, which I think makes a lot of sense. This seems like a very high frequency check flop. Villain bets 5 big blinds into 6.5. Hero calls, very standard thus far. We get an interesting turn. So the 4 of diamonds, hero checks. Villain bets 7 big blinds into 16.5. And hero decides to make a big raise to 28 big blinds. This is the first really interesting part of the hand. I'll talk about this in a minute, but we actually get to another interesting spot right after. Villain calls, and the river is the offsuit queen. So we go from semi-bluffing the turn to hitting a pretty good hand with exactly pot size bet left. And our hero decides to shove for pot, 74 big blinds. And our villain calls. We get to find out at the end of the video what our villain called with. We'll see. These are two really interesting decisions. Pre-flop's not interesting, flop's not interesting. Turn river, super interesting. I'll give my initial impressions before we dive into the solver, which might actually change my impressions as we go. So my feeling on the turn is that this turn raise is not very credible. The way this spot probably works is villain in position is betting small with a lot of with boats, but also with, 8x, maybe even some 7-6, some 9-9, some 10-10 that they didn't 3-bet pre-flop. And so when hero has a hand like queens or kings, which hero does have a lot, I'm very curious to see how the solver plays this spot, because it seems to me like the villain gets to bet, make this cheap protection / value bet without getting punished, because out of position is going to want to raise, maybe want to raise some king type hands, except that then you're basically allowing yourself to get all in, or forcing yourself all in against a range that contains 8-8 and 7-7 and 4-4 for that matter, and 5-6 for that matter. I think probably turn play is pretty passive for out of position. And I think what's more important than that is, we'll see what the solver does, but you also have to have your opponent believe that you would take king and check raise the turn here big. Now, yes, we could have 8-8, we could have 7-7, we could have 5-6, we could have 4-4. Those combos are few and far between. I think to get a fold from, let's say, 9s, I think we really need our villain to believe that we're going to check raise with kings, which I kind of don't think he'll buy. Now we get to the river, and it's funny because what I just said on the turn is that I don't think our opponent's going to believe us. And that makes for a decent spot to value shove light on the river. This is probably thinner than, I think when we look this river spot up in the solver, it's not going to like it. But I actually like the river shove because I dislike the turn raise, because the turn raise is not credible. But now that we've gotten there and I think our opponent's not going to believe us, I like this value shove this light value shove. The interesting thing is if we check the river, we might be able to fold, because I don't think our opponent's going to turn, 9s into a bluff. And yeah, our opponent can have some flush draws, but we block some of those with our jack of spades. I don't know. Anyways, I think I like the shove. So let's look in the solver and see what the almighty solver says we should have done. Out of position's checking. So we're checking full range on this board, which our hero does. So well played. As I expected, not too interesting. In position, interestingly, button's mostly using third pot here. It's not doing a lot of big betting, but our villain did bet big, so we will use that. And queen jack suited with spades, never folding, actually check raising 20% of the time and calling 80% of the time. So yeah, flop standard as expected. We get the 4 on the turn. Let's see if solver wants to do some donking. It does. So solver wants to bet quarter pot a quarter of the time. I would skip that. It seems not worth it to execute in practice. Interestingly, so our villain has used non-solver approved sizings on both streets, because here on the turn, the way that the solver wants to play is just to polarize and only overbet, basically trips plus overbet, 150% pot. and then the other stuff checks. Like it actually mixes in a little bit of 9-9 and 10-10 and Jack-Jack into the overbetting range, which is kind of like it's not really a merge. I don't think you're getting better hands to fold, but it's like it needs some board coverage there, and it kind of wants to bet those hands. And since it doesn't want to bet small, it wants to bet them for that size. Similarly, some 8-7 blocking boats, but also beating 8x. I don't know why that wants to overbet, but it does. Ace-8 occasionally does. You even see some 7-6 getting in there. And then, of course, your semi-bluffs. So the solver strategy is interesting. Let's see when it does third pot, how out of position is supposed to handle it. So out of position is supposed to raise about 12% of the time, and it's occasionally raising kings, queens, and aces, but not often. Like I said, I don't think people will believe that you're doing this, even though the solver does it sometimes, but I could be wrong. Now, obviously, if you're up against an opponent who splits sizings on the turn and you have enough of a read on them that like this small bet is basically always, pocket nines that just wants a little bit of value and protection, because when they have a full house, they like to go big because they know that they can. There are some opponents who I think, not super strong ones, but the opponents exist who are decent players, but who have these leaks where basically they just get too greedy with the really good hands, and then they bet the amount that their hand wants to bet, essentially. And you can make really strong reads, and then you can raise all of your Jack-Jack plus because you know that they have worse than Jack-Jack most of the time. Anyways, yeah, like I said, I don't think we want to raise these overpairs. Solver's raising only a small portion of trips, although it doesn't really have it, and actually only half of its boats because it just doesn't raise that much with queen jack suited. So it's actually mixing all three options, raise, call, fold. So this raise is solver approved, but not Phil approved. I don't really like it. So, but it is interesting that this is really close between a call and a fold if you don't raise. It's very similar in EV. Our hero said that he didn't think he could call. He wrote that in the comments. So he felt he didn't think he could call, so it's raise or fold, and decided to raise this one. I think that there's, he thought he couldn't call, and solver says it's close, so he's not necessarily wrong. And even if you were wrong, that's not a leak in thought process, just sometimes you're slightly off. And I don't know if this happened to him, but sometimes you can fall into the trap of saying, okay, well, I can't call, so I have to pick raise or fold. And either, I'm going to randomize and I got a high number, so I raise, or I don't really want to fold, I raise. And that becomes the whole thought process, beginning to end. And you only have 20 seconds to act, so sometimes that is the whole thought process. It's important to think in that time, if you can, about what you're representing and if you can represent it well by raising. So if the thought process goes, okay, I know I can't call, should I raise or fold? Then it needs to go, well, what hands would I raise for value? And what sizing would I use? And will he believe me? And then you can decide to raise or fold. This is an online hand. When you play online, you have to think really fast. And sometimes you can't get the whole thought process in. But it's a really important part of the thought process is, can I rep this? Our hero may have had that go through his mind or not. He didn't say whether he did or not. But I wanted to point that out because that's something that at times I've failed to get to in the thought process and the time allotted. And I know a lot of other players have as well. All right, so we head to the river after raising pretty big, almost pot, a little less than pot. We hit the offsuit, queen, river. Okay, so I was wrong. Solver does like shoving this now that we've gotten here this way. It's just still good enough, I guess. Yeah, so when we do shove, so it's interesting. This is a weird one. So how do I put this? Normally when you're value shoving river, it's because half of the time you get called or more, your hand is good. And here, actually, that's not the case. Here, 60% of the time that we get called, we're beat, which means that our shove it's not like the clearest value shove, but I think what ends up happening is if we check, we have less EV than we do. Actually, it doesn't check this combo, so we can't find out. But yeah, basically when we check, we have less EV. So this is one of those weird spots. These don't come up often, where normally when you value bet, you want to be good more than half the time when called. Here, actually, it wants to value shove, even though it is not good half the time when called, just because it ends up working out better than checking. So actually, solver approved of this river shove, as did I. Solver approved of the turn raise. I did not. And let's take a look at what. So in the solver, when facing the turn check raise, it always calls ace-8 it folds 9-9, folds half of tens, calls 8-7. So that gives you a rough idea of like, it's calling with, you know, half the bluff catchers, folding with half. And then on river, it's now folding ace-8, folding half of the remaining, like if it got here with any 9s and 10s. So basically we're gonna now find out what our opponent called with. And if it's a light call, we can kind of guess, well, that it's somewhat likely they didn't believe us on the turn. But if it's a strong call, we don't really learn very much. So drum roll, please. All right, villain called with ace-8 of hearts. So that was a solver-approved turn call if you got in there this way, but then a river fold in the solver. Kind of implies that he didn't believe us, I think, which is what I guessed on the turn. And our hero wins a nice pot. So hopefully you found that helpful, both to our hero and anybody else watching. And I look forward to the next videos, getting some hands from you guys in the comment section below, or you can email some hands in online hand history format, please, so that this works nice and easy, to askphilgalfond@gmail.com. That's it for today. I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.